You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Counterflow Podcast. Great to have you with us once again this week. You're in for a treat. You are in for a treat. Before we get to it, I do have to thank all of the people that took part in our last Zoom call for the Patreon supporters. What a great call that was with Ciprian, aka Vin Armani. We had a good discussion. And I say we, I wasn't much part of it. I don't want to be. I want to give the platform over to my guest and to you guys in this exclusive club. We're going to do another one this month. Patreon.com/counterflow. $5 or more per month get you in this club, and you can be part of this Zoom call. Again, they are not recorded. They are not published on any platform. It's a private Zoom call between you guys, myself, and our guest. We're going to do it again this month. Every month we're going to do it. So join that club. And now on to what I would say is one of my favorite episodes maybe ever, but in a long time. It's not just a top 10. Maybe it's in the top 5. I'll let you guys decide. This is a very good episode. I've got David Gornoski. He's one of those people that a lot of you have been writing me, please get David Gornoski on the show. I've done that, and I could not be happier about that decision. He's the host of the radio show. Well, you're about to find out some news on that. A Neighbor's Choice, a show that looks at politics, science, and culture through the lens of Jesus's personhood revolution. He's online and terrestrial radio, but you're about to find out, like I said, some news on that exact detail, that exact topic. He's also got things hidden. He's interviewed personalities like Ron Paul and Jordan Peterson, and now he's about to take a few steps down to come on this show. I kid. I'm so happy he's here. Finally, David Gornoski is on the show. Welcome, David. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. I have summed up a little bit from some of your content that you might have watched wrestling over the years. And so that's why I did the finally, because only the nerdiest among us will get that. But welcome to the show. I've had so many people write and say, you got to get David Gornoski on the show. I think you guys would do well together. So I'm glad to finally get you here. And it's interesting. It comes at a time when your show is kind of making some moves, some changes. And so give my audience an intro for yourself and then kind of go into what you're doing with The Neighbor's Choice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was great to be on your show. I've always enjoyed talking to other folks who have like-minded interests. And yeah, you caught me on a big transition day. I'm not transitioning like we're supposed to lately. I'm not doing that. I mean, I am pangender. I tell that to my friends in the left that, I'm pangender, which means I'm beyond all genders at all times, at all places. I'm the ultimate heel that will stop all of you. And the ultimate fulcrum of what it means to have gender. I'm just joking. But I've decided to take a pause from the terrestrial radio side of my show, which was doing a daily news 2-hour live show Monday through Friday. I'd started that in 2018 in an Orlando radio station, News Radio WFLA in Orlando. Then I did WHBO News Talk Florida. I did both of them for a time, and then I was focused in on the Tampa Bay community during the course of this whole COVID thing. I mean, I launched the News Talk format station. It was a different format, and I kind of launched the News Talk format with them right at 2020, right when the pandemic was unleashing. And so that was a wild time every day when I'm worried about, okay, where are we going to get our food? Because the store shelves are empty and I have to go up every day and try to make sense of the news, That's pretty crazy. And I'm not trained in, I guess, in any kind of formal sense in traditional broadcast news, although my study in college was in communications. But, there was I'd done radio sometime in the past as a producer, but I wanted to do A Neighbor's Choice, the news show, to give people a glimpse into the big picture with common day current events, right? And so I wanted to be able to reach two different groups at the same time. Folks who like Jordan Peterson type stuff, and then people who like Rush Limbaugh type stuff. At the time I started the show, Rush Limbaugh was still going. And I thought, okay, how can I, thread the needle between that kind of deep concepts of mythology and big picture stuff with everyday current events, news and everything, and try to make the big picture stuff accessible to the heartland, working class Americans. And I think we did a good job at that. But I felt that for a variety of different reasons, it was time to take a pause on the terrestrial radio side of things. One of the reasons being is that I needed to take a break from the daily news cycle of doing a live, pacing on the news. I needed to dive into what I was end up doing is sometimes I would record because I have things hidden in the podcast, and I would record like back-to-back podcast episodes, sometimes 2 hours each, and then do the 2-hour live show right after. It's just doing live program all the time. And I said, wait a second, let me try to, double down on the things that people most seem to really like about my content, which is the deep dive anthropology, getting into mimetic theory, getting into this stuff. And the news cycle, having to react to Biden's drooling every day and all this stuff was kind of like, all right, I just need to take a break from that and roll up my sleeves and get to work doubling down on the stuff that I feel I helped pioneer, which is, I was talking about Rene and Girard before it was cool. Now everybody's talking about it, and that's fine. That's what we wanted to happen. But I want to go back to that and really double down on trying to help expand that idea and develop those ideas further for our online audience. Most of my audience is online. And so, we took a pause from the terrestrial radio side, which is bittersweet because I liked engaging with people of older demographics, right? Who are not listening to Peterson, who are not listening to trad Catholic podcasts or Orthodox, or, they're not into that stuff. They're just working class people, firemen, police officers. I want to engage them with high level concepts in an accessible way. And I'll miss that, but I'm sure that many of them, and they have come over to the online side of things, and we'll go along for the journey together.
Well, you just said a few things that are appropriate for this. For one, I am a fireman, a firefighter.
There you go.
And some of my audience consists of firefighters, so we can take some of these high level theories and make it accessible to me and to my audience, and because you are good at that. Before we get into some of this, three of my favorite interviews, I think you have interviewed, I know for sure 2 of them, I think the third. And we might be the only 2 shows that have interviewed this trio of people. 3 of my favorite interviewees are Father Turbo on a regular basis, Lou Rockwell, and Jeff Deist.
Yeah.
I think you've had all 3. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. We have to be the only 2 I can think of that have had that trio. Yeah, those are 3 of my favorite human beings, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, political shifts. Let me ask you that first. Have you had those over the last couple of years?
I guess so. You could say it that way. I mean, I still believe in calling my, Christian voluntarism, but I do think that we have to be way more pragmatic and incremental in how to get to those types of directions of society. When you saw, again, doing the daily news cycle and seeing every day trying to process the news. And I got to know a lot of the big COVID science doctors and early treatment doctors that were getting censored. I was friends with them early on during the pandemic, and they helped me personally, in many different ways, and different things that we had going on. But, seeing the level of audacity of evil, made me realize that we've got to be a little bit more pragmatic in how we build our coalitions to get things done culturally. And trying to be a purist is, that we don't have time for that anymore. I mean, I don't think I've ever been a purist in that sense. I've always been open-minded I don't call myself a libertarian. I don't call myself a conservative or anything like that. But I've tried to, originally when I created A Neighbor's Choice, when it was just a podcast first, my idea behind it was to outflank the left, to beat them at their own game, right? Mm-hmm. And I still believe that. And I just think that the way we do it, we have to be a little bit more pragmatic in how we work these things out, instead of trying to basically say, it's either this purist vision or we can't do anything,
I heard you mention something on a recent, it might have been the one today where I believe you called it like your last radio hour or something like that, where you said there's people in our milieu, I suppose, that are basically would say, we've got to crush the left. We've got to get rid of the left before we can move forward in society.
Yeah.
We've got to end the left. That's not necessarily possible, is it?
Yeah, it's not. There's ways in which that you can take that apart and make different ways. I guess that's true. Like you could, discredit evil ideas in certain ways. But you think about the people who are actually going along with this stuff. Most of the people who go along with this stuff are normies,
Mm-hmm.
They're just eating at Buffalo Wild Wings. They're having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to be able to get them to understand these high level concepts. They're not high level, but they're been ghettoized as such, right? That's what nerds do. No, we've got to be able to bring that to the normies who are not going to be political nerds. They're not going to be economic nerds or theology nerds, but they do want to be a part of something. That's why someone like a Jordan Peterson has been successful in reaching those types. You can go to any Applebee's in America and you go around the young men and you'll probably hear some of them say they like Jordan Peterson and they've heard of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Andrew Tate, is another figure like that who's become more popular in recent times because of his, reaching people with a message that seems edgy and needed for challenging the culture of our time. But I think that we've got to be able to reach people where they're at, and I think that beating the left is something that let's put it this way: the left is dealing with this is the weird thing about it. The left is dealing with a part of the Christian message, and the right is dealing with a part of the Christian message. And the right sees the left as wholly other from the Christian message, and they feel that they must existentially defeat them. And the left feels the same way. They feel that the right is wholly other than that which is divine. Now, they don't necessarily call it Christian. Some of them Christian evangelicals are leftists, but generally speaking, they're the highest good. They feel like the rights project is wholly incompatible with it. And there's different elements that both have that need to be redeemed and the errors discarded and created into a kind of a new way forward. And that's not centrism or anything like that.
Right.
But it's something that, I think we should not take the position of being the reactionary. If you're a reactionary, I'm sorry. I heard somebody recently say that we need to be reactionaries. And I agree with his ideas on some level, but we're not to react. If you're reacting, you're in the passenger seat, you're in the back seat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's the problem. Maybe, I'm a reactionary. They think they're a tough guy. I'm like, dude, reactionaries are the guys in the back seat. They're the guys in the little booster seat.
Mm-hmm.
You're going too fast. Slow down. Okay. Well, you're a reactionary. What else did you want to say? Okay. Right. Think about that next week. Don't care about you. But if you're really driving the thing forward, you're going to be moving things progress. You're going to be progressing things. You're going to be moving things forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Christians should be. And my standard of Christian is on this level, on this conversation is, do you want to imitate and follow Jesus in the way he lived his life and conducted himself? Just that level before you get into, are you truly Christian in the church?
Sure. Right. You were, as you mentioned, one of the first ones on the scene to talk about Girard and mimetic theory, mimetic desire, and things of this nature. For those who heard you say that and are thinking, I heard him say some words that I don't get. Yeah. Let's give kind of an easy to understand explanation of what mimetic theory was about, and then I'd like to get into how we really can see it all around us once you understand it and see that lens.
Right. Well, mimetic theory was developed by a late French anthropologist named Rene Girard, he died in 2015. He was a professor at Stanford University, and he studied literature at first. Then he got into mythology, and he got into understanding the archaic origins of human culture, ultimately anthropology. And what he found astounded him because he at first was not really a believer in Christ, but the more he studied, he realized that all of the great works of literature of the Western tradition, great novels, great plays like Shakespeare's work, things like Cervantes' Don Quixote, the novel, all these things were dealing with similar revelations of the way human desire actually operated. And he realized that there was instead of what was going on in academia at the time, where everything was in vogue to deconstruct everything as wholly unique and of revelatory of the author, right? What does this say about the author? And what does that say, deconstructing everything about the author? He was looking for what the common patterns were in all these different works. And he saw that same triangular pattern of desire emerge everywhere he looked in each great piece of literature. And he realized that that was actually an inheritance of the biblical influence on Western society that had produced unique types of novels that were so penetrative of how human conflict and desire and relationship actually works, right? So he started to realize, wait a second, you can't see these types of literature outside of the influence of the biblical, tradition. And in cultures that have been steeped in it longer seem to produce these very revelatory novels that reveal how human conflict works and desire. And so he started to create a construct called mimetic theory, mimetic desire, meaning we desire what our neighbor has. We desire what others around us appear to be desiring. You don't just do imitation like, if I stick my tongue out, you stick your tongue out. If I wear a red hat, you wear a red hat. We do that, but that's more rote imitation. Mimetic is just another word, mimesis. It's just using that to signify this is not just rote imitation. This is also what we perceive others desiring, right? So something more about, if I buy this car, does this signal a certain social status that I'm a good citizen because I'm environmentally conscious, right? And I want to be perceived as that when I go to this party tonight, right? Or if I live in this zip code, or if I live in this neighborhood, am I going to attain this sense of what it perceives to be, what you perceive to be a completion of your satisfaction? What those people have, if I have that neighborhood, will I have what they have? Will I feel what they feel? It's kind of an existential thing. You're always looking around. Why do they have those many followers and I don't on Twitter? Why do they have that car and I don't? Why do their Facebook photos look so happy while they go off to Tanzania and every place in the world on adventures and I'm stuck at my office job? Always looking at others, and that's what we call envy or covetousness in the Bible. And the 10 Commandments, they complete with the 10th commandment being, thou shalt not covet anything belonging to your neighbor, right? Thy neighbor's donkey, thy neighbor's wife, thy neighbor's anything. The emphasis being on your neighbor. Your neighbor signifies that which you should desire. And that can be good or bad. If your neighbor is desiring holiness, if your neighbor is desiring joy, humility, washing your feet, then you'll desire to wash his feet and others around it. If your neighbor desires to be petty, arrogant, egoistic, self-indulgent, if your neighbor desires to be popular, rich for the sake of being rich, then you will desire those things because who you surround yourself with or who you will end up becoming like. And so if you go around and that includes people online, that includes books you read, that includes the pop figures you listen to, the gurus that you're listening to, mindset tapes or something, you're going to pick up on their desires and their wants more than you realize. And so we don't desire things because we intrinsically desire their essence. We are typically actually desiring the neighbor. And the object is a kind of symbol of that neighbor's status that we feel we fundamentally lack. And so oftentimes, mimetic desire, when it looks rivalrous, will not feel like, you'll typically say, I don't really want to be like that person. They're a drug addict, or they're a liberal, or they're poor. But there's something about them that they do seem to have that you say, I wish I did have that part, Like maybe they're poor and they're a liberal, but they seem really happy, or you know what I mean? That they seem really content living under a bridge or something. You're like, well, I want whatever that part of that is, but I don't want the rest of it. I don't want the drug addiction. I don't want the leftist stuff or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's typically how mimetic desire actually functions in a realistic way in people's lives, because you'll typically say, well, you know, you might have people you rivalrously want to be like, and they'll say, no, I want nothing to do with that guy. And usually that's the person that they do actually have a desire for something about what they do that they kind of, it rubs them the wrong way. But it's actually because they want to have whatever it is that they seem to be modeling.
Yes.
And so rivalry can come from negative conflict. So when you have positive mimesis, you know, I teach you how to do a different instrument and you learn it, or you teach me back something else. So it's positive mimesis. You know, I teach you this, you teach that. You teach me this, I teach that. It becomes negative when you start desiring the same thing that you can't quite attain. You know, so if you desire the same food, we desire the same partner, if you desire the same plot of land, and that's where conflict comes into being, right? Because, you know, remember Senator Rand Paul's neighbor tackled him, right? He said that there was yard clippings that were 1 centimeter on his property line, remember? So remember that whole saying that good fences make good neighbors? That guy lost his mind, and he felt the need to tackle a man off of his lawnmower because the inciting incident was a violation of his sense of self, right? This is my space and you're a dirty Republican, but you don't touch my space, right? And so that space was violated, bam, nuts, you know, violence unleashes. That is like an example of why, you know, Girard says we don't fight because of our differences, we fight because of our similarities. Okay? And so we fight because of how similar we are, how we share things. That's what breeds conflict in the worst type. And we point out differences in the midst of a conflict because we kind of don't want to recognize how close we are to our enemies and our rivals. So we will highlight the differences. So if you have a restaurant and you have an Indian cuisine and then somebody else has an Indian cuisine, you'll say there's nothing alike. They're Northern style, we're Southern style. They do a fusion with some kind of a Chinese influence, you know, Pan-Asian mix. We're not, you know, you'll highlight all these little minuscule differences, but to the general view of things, it looks like you're very close, you know, and it looks like you're caught in conflict because you're moving your prices. You put yourself in the same area of the city. You're caught up in a rivalry. Have you ever noticed that? Like if there's a Tex-Mex restaurant, another one will open up right next door. And you're like, you know, you could just open over, you know, somewhere else. But sometimes there's this rivalrous obsession with beating the neighbor, right? And that can cause a lot of dysfunction in society because if you're caught up with trying to one-up somebody else, you don't have time to do great things together, right? And so Girard said that, well, if we are caught up, because he says it's very easy once positive reciprocal relationship goes negative, it's very easy for it to stay negative. It's hard to get it back positive, right? And so that's why best friends, they have a falling out and it's hard to ever get it back. Or you'll hear about those bands that they were really successful and then they get rich and successful too much. And then they something turns them off and they can never cooperate on the reunion tours and they're always having rivalry, right? So it's hard to get positive mimesis back once negative mimesis starts reciprocally feeding off of itself between you and somebody else. And so the question becomes, okay, well, how are we still here as a species? Because animals don't do that. Animals don't have mimetic desire to the degree that we do. You know, the alpha wolf, when he defeats his rival for the contest of who will lead the pack, the rival submits his neck, and the alpha wolf usually does not go for a fatal strike. Because there's a dominance to submission pattern that's been recognized by animals that they're not going to go for the petty final strike. This has been established. I'm leader. You're submit. That's good. We'll take it from there. That's good. Okay. And humans are not the same way. You know, if someone beats somebody else, you know, whoever survives from that, you know, is going to get a faction and come back and try to raid that village down the road. Right. You know, if there's any survivors, you know, and so there's that's where we get genocides and, you know, vendettas that go in the Middle East for thousands of years. Right. This person hates that person. That person hates that person. You know, Same way with Europe, there's different countries in Europe hate that other country and they can't stand them and they're right next door to them and they just want to tear them apart.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just goes on and on and on. So how are we still here? Because we were until we were pretty brutal and violent, and we still are. But I mean, in our origins, before we had stuff like law and courts and, delayed, punishments and things like that, we were much more in a primitive state. So how, if we were negative, when we get caught up in negative rivalry, how come we didn't just annihilate ourselves? Right. And so that's the question that Girard's asking when he gets into the world of mythology and anthropology. And that's when he starts to see, well, wait a second, you see all around cultures, you see human sacrifice. You see all these cultures that don't know each other all over the globe, they're doing ritual human sacrifice at the earliest stages. And, or they're doing, mob killings, just like when on a more primitive level, you don't have to do necessarily a ritual. You just mob and kill somebody who looks like they've got an evil spirit. So he starts to say, okay, you see this pattern happening. Then you look at mythology, and mythology always has these creation stories. Again, whichever creation story you look, it starts off in chaos, and then somebody pops somebody's head. A god hits another god's head, and out pops humans, and out pops water, and out pops, the oceans, and here comes the rivers. And you're like, what is going on here? Why is it that this cartoonish act of violence against Marta or whatever creates people, freeze, this group of people, like order and differentiation out of this cartoonish kind of weird, cartoonish violence that seems kind of not realistic. It's because that's actually a remembrance of a primordial lynching that took place. That's remembered hundreds and hundreds of years and through the generations, and it becomes told in a coded form of mythology where gods are doing these things in these fantastic ways. But at its core, it's actually just a way that humans figured out how to resolve conflict accidentally. Because if you and I have a conflict with one another, it can spill out to bad blood around the community. If there's a famine, if there's a shortage of food, or whatever. And so you have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to resolve this? Well, this isn't something that you thought out in a kind of planned way. But if everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else, it can be easily seen how you could consensusly kind of start pointing fingers in the same direction at a singular target.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this can happen two different ways, typically. This isn't something Girard really spells out and delineates as two different types of scapegoats, but I've noticed this. You have one type of scapegoating where you have a conflict between two people, and basically the community around them gathers around and basically joins on one of the sides.
Yes.
And then you have another, which is more like, okay, this person is just different in some way. This person is just too short, too small, from a different ethnic tribe, has a handicap, a disfigurement, maybe they're albino, hunchback, clubfoot, like Oedipus, Medusa, too ugly, and Cyclops, got a one eye. You ever seen those little goats and stuff that are born in India even now, and they'll be on the Daily Star and they'll parade it around. It's got one eye, and they'll say it's a god or something for a few moments in the village. That's a vestige of this, right? Of like, oh my goodness, this is something different about this person. What does that say? What is that? Are they cursed? Are they demonic? What's going on here? But maybe that's the person that's caused things to get out of control. And so everybody kind of goes around and unifies around, you caused this, you're a witch, you're disfigured because the gods hate you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you did something to cause that disfigurement. Or something, and you're too tall because you're a monster, or you're too short because again you're cursed by God or something, and that becomes the occasion by which to say, okay, you are guilty of what's causing us to all have this conflict. You've put a spell on us, you've put tension in the community, and they unify themselves and kill that person and devour them or send them off of a cliff, and that creates such a cathartic ecstasy of unity that oftentimes it's going to correspond with orgies and other things, feasting and orgies. which is what you do at the movie theater, right? You go get popcorn, you and your girlfriend, having a good time. You come out, the movie gives you catharsis. Wow, the villain's been defeated. You feel closer together. And then, that's why movies were associated with, licentious behavior or whatever, right? Because it creates that kind of cathartic, fuzzy feeling. And you can have that different ways to this day. You go in to see any kind of thing, pro wrestling you mentioned, politics, Trump gets defeated and you go and have a big party because that's your community and you're going to have a common cathartic release. We beat him,
Ding dong, the witch is dead.
Yeah. So we still have vestiges of that today, right? And we don't really have an explanation as to why we feel that way, but it does feel as if something has resolved where we were at tension with one another. Now we feel, wow, not so bad after all. We have this every day. Families have scapegoats, right? Relationships have scapegoats. Businesses have scapegoats. CEOs need to be chopped, right? Societies have scapegoats. Right now, America's in a transition between, where they've been transitioning away from, minority communities being the scapegoat class to kick on to, white middle class and working class people that don't think the right things as the new official designated scapegoat class that you're allowed to kick and they're not allowed to kick back. Societies who are operating in a spirit of rebellion against what Jesus did in history are going to cling on stubbornly to some kind of scapegoat class in various different ways. And it's up to us as Christians to live not by scapegoats, but to find unity through Trinitarian relationship, right? The Holy Spirit is the third person of the Trinity, and that Holy Spirit is also relationship. And that's what binds us together. So we have to find ways to imitate each other in healthy ways that does not lead to scandal, so that we're not in negative rivalry, because the more negative rivalry we have, it builds up tension and disarray in the community, which discharges that energy into scapegoats. But Jesus destroyed the scapegoat mechanism. He revealed human sacrifice as the folly that it was. And progressively in history, as societies continue to wrestle with the haunting of the cross that has revealed to us how scapegoating is based on a lie and it's based on unjust murder as portrayed in the story of Jesus Christ and his passion. Now, the more we scapegoat, the more it creates more disunity, right? It used to create unity. Now it creates disunity when you try it now.
That's the spirit of the crowd, the spirit of the group, and almost in a democracy type way is something where I think this manifests too. Is that what you see?
Yeah. Yeah, I say that America is possessed by a god named Demos.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Because our democracy is what we use. And I think they put that word "our" in there as a tell that they're running out of believability. Even by the standards of democracy, they know, wait a second, we can't just say we're a democracy anymore. We got to say we're our democracy, because "our" is kind of like another word for democracy. So it's like, when I don't remember, I think it was Peter Thiel that said, when you see them putting the word science by something, it's a sign that it's a weak field of science, Yeah,
right.
Like when social science, it's like, well, it's try hard, right? And so our democracy is like a try hard sell that, I guess we're not really living up even to the standards of majority wins really anymore. It's more of an oligarchy. It's always been an oligarchy for some time, but it's becoming more transparently, brazenly so. But fundamentally, the oligarchy is still saying to those who believe in the faith of the culture, look, we're doing everything we're doing to you for our democracy. What is our democracy? It is the sacred body of the people and their will. And the will is that the people are completely emancipated from all differentiation, from all boundaries. That's the spirit of rebellion, right? That our democracy is pledging to spread a fervent fire of faith to upend differentiation and boundaries all over the world. That's our messianic vision of our government today and its culture.
Do you see a religious bent to a lot of ideology, political ideologies, almost with a religious fervor to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all politics is a form of participating in a kind of religion that is incompatible with Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's one of those things where you have to, if you were living in Japan and you realize, you know, you're 1% of the population if you're a Christian, right? You have to engage the Japanese mind as it's atheist or agnostic or Buddhist or Shinto. You have to engage it where it is. And that's the way I look at politics. It's like, this is not a good religion, but this is 99% of my neighbors, including those who call themselves Christian. And I need to be able to work with people where they're at. You can't go around to Japan and start saying, you're all liars.
Mm-hmm.
You're all fools. You don't do that. So you need to have that same gracious spirit when you're engaging with your fellow Americans, you know, to realize whatever their ideology is, that doesn't make you better than them because you kind of see through the ritual sacrifice inherent to their ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I think that libertarian ideology has a way of being very much in rivalry with the notion of power. And in some sense, it becomes an idol. In some sense, libertarian ideology idolizes power. It's almost like fixating on power and saying, I don't want to have any government tomorrow. Okay, well, technically, Jesus came to end the power. So there's a truth that connects to that. But that spirit of, I don't want to have you telling me what to do, makes you idolize the concept of having power, and might makes right to a degree that's probably unhealthy for you to idolize in the first place. So you become a mimetic rival to the statist. But the more you compete with that statist paradigm, the more you're becoming obsessed with the thinking of that statist paradigm. Does that make sense? So you become that which you hate, even though, and that's why if you go to Libertarian Party meetings, you'll see them fighting with great intrigue, like it's a James Bond movie over who's the treasurer of a $50 budget. And you're like, what in the blue hell? I thought you guys thought about taking on power and the stakes are so low. But the animosity is this high for a $50 treasury.
Yeah.
This is about how you're going to buy your, you know, whether you guys are going to go to Golden Corral or not for next week's meeting. Why is there so much intrigue and avarice and ambition? You know what I mean? When there's no stakes on the line. Imagine if you actually had power. You know, imagine if you actually had to deal with it. Maybe you've taken power and made it into an idol. And that doesn't mean every libertarian, of course. I'm just saying.
Right.
I just picked out libertarian because it's the obvious one that people are going to say, oh, well, they're the ones that don't believe in political power. Well, yeah, actually, even they can have that same problem, you know?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Girard said almost the smaller the stakes are at play here, the more intense the fighting can get and the disunity can get over something. Is that correct?
I don't know. Do you have a quote or something?
No, I just, in my study, I saw it at some point researching that stuff.
I mean, things can be very petty, and that can lead to really ridiculous conflicts that don't seem to have any proportionality to that which they're fighting over. I mean, you know, again, I saw that growing up in high school. I mean, you see one person looked at the other person's girlfriend wrong, you know, and bam, chairs are flying all over the whole cafeteria. I mean, everybody's throwing a chair somewhere. And I'm like, where are you throwing that chair?
Yeah.
There's nobody there. Why are you throwing that chair in that direction? But somebody decided to throw a chair. You know, it's just like a wave of violence just spreads like a virus. Boom. You know? Right. And it's like, for what? You know?
Yeah.
For what?
I guess
someone threatened to kill you? What happened? Somebody looked at somebody's girlfriend wrong, and then that made his friends jump up, and, you know.
In some ways, the trans debate is almost the same thing. You're talking about 0.02% of the population, and that's become one of the most heated fought over topics on the planet right now.
Right. Because they're at war with differentiation. This is so important. It's something that I've emphasized in my show that a lot of folks who've talked about Girard don't hone in enough on.
Okay.
Because it gets them in dangerous territory, is that why is political correctness what it is, right? Political correctness is what I call a cheap ripoff of Christianity, you know, and wokeism is just a fundamentalist escalation of political correctness, right? So political correctness was like your mainline Protestant denominations, right? And now wokeism is like fundamentalism, right? Like in 1990s fundamentalist Christianity that's going beyond mainline Christianity and getting into more fervor, right? Well, wokeism is just the latest iteration of that. But it's all based around this idea of ripping off Christianity's aesthetic and concern for victims. It's concern for the least of these. It's concern for the underdog, for the oppressed. And it's always on the hunt to look for ways in which differentiation is causing people to be harmed or victimized. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
So that's what's going on right now, is that everything you see in society is about chasing out differentiation of boundaries, eliminating all of those. Why?
Yep.
Because in the past, differentiation could be the occasion for scapegoating, right? Remember what I said earlier about that arbitrary difference that someone seems to have. They look they look differently, or they look like they're from a different tribe or something. That difference can make all the difference, right? Where you start to say, wait a second, this person, we're going to eliminate them. They're not part of our in-group. We're going to otherize them. Well, guess what? That becomes something that is a scandal over time, right? Because you're going to say, in the light of the cross, where now the scapegoat is the most sacred, where the victim is the most sacred, not expendable, but the exact opposite of expendable, completely protected, now you're going to rethink all those different boundaries and differentiation and distinctions as potential scandals that need to be eliminated themselves. So whereas in ancient societies, differentiation and taboos were the point of protection, right? You put those taboos in place so to not trigger violence out of control or the scapegoating antidote to the out of control violence. That's what Jesus talks about when he says, how can Satan cast out Satan? Satan is both the accuser in the anthropological sense. He's both the spirit of accusation, and he's also the spirit of chaos that accusation sweeps away.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he creates the scandal, lust, jealousy, right? Theft, bad character that breeds contempt and all this disunity. And then he comes in with the big strong man, the big, or the big witch doctor, or the big sweep to boom, we're going to kick this guy out or kill this person or eat them in the earliest stages. The earliest records of societies that seemed to flourish were doing ritual cannibalism. This is the ultimate form of mimetic desire, of desiring somebody else's being and trying to consume it as yours. We do this all the time, sublimated through other things.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the iPhone, getting the car, using sex as a cheap way of, I've got a body count. What is that? That's a kind of cannibalism. Even the language there betrays the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Body count. What, you defeated them? You killed them? But yet men and women both use this language to say, I've conquered it. I've destroyed. I've taken their otherness and I've consumed it. Now it's mine. I've had a piece of it.
Man, that body count, the conqueror of the other in society today. Oof, that was a good point. It's kind of disturbing as I think about a checkered past and hear stuff like that. But you're totally right.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what we're told to desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we think that those are cool things to do? Because we have been told that those who are worth imitating are the ones who do those things.
Yeah.
View women or men as cheap, as objects to conquer.
Which is the Andrew Tate thing that you also brought up as well. He's kind of got that facade about him that young men think, oh, that's kind of cool. That's powerful.
Right. That's because what is that doing? That's a reactionary. That's the backseat driver, backseat kid. Andrew Tate's in the backseat. He's reacting to the spirit of the age, which is trying to outlaw masculinity, right?
Yes.
And so when you outlaw healthy masculinity, it's going to show up on the margins as this like naughty little, don't tell me I can't tell my girl she's too fat or something. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, It's like, don't tell me I'm not going to do that. And I show you tricks. And then, you can get girls using tricks like that. I mean, so that they can use, it's like any false teacher will have ways in which they can do signs and wonders, right? Right? See, that's the thing. Look at me. You got a Bugatti like me if you do what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Join Islam. No, not doing that, See what I mean? It's like a false teacher's always going to give you a down payment on their types of signs and wonders to give them authority to speak into your life and tell you to do things the way they do and to worship who they worship. But it's ultimately futile to chase after false gods, And Islam is a false god.
And those are inversions of Christ's, of truth, really, of Christ's virtues. They take them, invert them, and it looks like they're cloaked in mostly good, but the evil is undergirding each time, rather than, I've said this on the show many times, rather than humility, it's pride, right? And guys like Andrew Tate kind of push that out there. Self-worship, worship the self. We are the man, we are the best, that type of thing.
Right. And that's reacting to, again, a spirit of you're worthless or something because you're a man or you're a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so you say, well, that's the dialectic of Satan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the dialectic of Satan. So that's why we don't want to get trapped. And remember, like I said, with the libertarian who ends up idolizing power because he's so obsessed with beating the status, right? So the same thing happens in anything, like money. You can have people who are chasing money in the traditional sense, like the Wolf of Wall Street, but then you also have this kind of fake ascetic thing where it's like, I'm going to eschew all money and go off and abandon my kids and their responsibility or something and just live, picking berries and stuff. But that's really kind of you're still looking to your neighbor and then reacting to them in a mirrored opposite way, but you're still looking to your neighbor to pace your behavior, right?
Yes.
So when Andrew Tate is like, well, look at me, you're not supposed to do like this and I'm going to do it. It's like, okay, I made him sound like that guy from Austin Powers on accident. The Scottish guy, fat,
yes.
It's all right, man. But that's not even his accent. I'm sorry. But you get into this thing where he's like, okay, well, you tell me I can't do it, so I'm going to touch it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to dress this way or do this thing. And so you're still looking to an authority figure like the person in the back seat, and you're still modeling your behavior off of your neighbor. You haven't exited the matrix of desire, right? And you can't really exit the matrix of your desire. You can only point it in the right directions, which are of Christ, right?
Yes.
But Jesus is the only person in history who changed the world who did not pretend to be a guru. Everybody else is always telling you, just try to keep up with me. I'm richer than you. You're poor because you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche, I'm smarter than you, but yet he's babbling and chewing on his tongue because he was broken by the reality of the Christ.
Yes.
And he couldn't reconcile it with what he had concluded as to what was happening in history. But ironically enough, he knows more about what Girard was identifying about the impact of the cross in society than most theologians and Christians, fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes those in error can get some really good truths along the way, but their pride breaks them from being able to fully surrender to the truth, right? But Nietzsche, he's idolizing power, and what happens? He's left powerless, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many folks, they always send themselves up as the guru, but they want you to imitate them in a kind of, I'm the hero, I am the God, and you must try to keep up with me. But they don't want you to imitate them too closely, Like if somebody looked just like Andrew Tate, but was younger and had more followers and had nicer cars and a bigger house, I guarantee you, and if he was saying exactly what Andrew Tate was saying, maybe he was one of his disciples that beat him, I guarantee you that would irritate Andrew Tate beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Because, and it's for anybody. I'm not judging anybody. If somebody looked like me and talked like me and was younger than me and better well-spoken than me and said my message and I felt like didn't give me respect as getting my ideas from me or something, it would bother me too. So we're all in it. We all have that mimetic desire. We want people to imitate us, but not too close, right? And that's what our fashion is for. That's what clothing is for. All these different things we do, beard, everything is designed to kind of distinguish us in a kind of differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have a property. That's why you have a property line. That's why, we have different concepts. Like I am a libertarian. I'm a conservative. I'm an American, right? That's why we have a border, right? That's why people feel existentially threatened when people are just flooding into a border. I mean, that's a natural feeling to feel. But that what the spirit of our age has been since Christ progressively has been to try to eliminate those differentiations and boundaries. And some of them are bad. I don't think it's right to tell a black person that they can't drink at the same water fountain. That was a bad distinction.
Right.
It was a bad boundary, right?
Yeah.
It was reacting to other bad problems that had happened with Reconstruction and a whole bunch of other stuff going on and what the North was doing. But still fundamentally, I mean, that's not a good boundary to maintain and to fight and die for, right? So there are good boundaries that need to be reevaluated. Not all differentiation is good, but not all differentiation is bad. But the spirit of our age, if you get one thing about our culture, the spirit of our age is that all differentiation and boundaries are bad.
Yes.
Because why? Because they're haunted by the cross, and the cross reveals the occasion by which differentiation can lead to sacrifice. And because we're haunted by the moment of the cross, we're constantly looking to figure out how to alleviate any possibility of somebody feeling marginalized.
Yes.
Right? But we are slower to renounce our violence, and we're faster to renounce boundaries and differentiation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we don't want to get rid of the violence. That's the conceit of leftism and globalism and all this stuff. We got to kill Russians in Ukraine because we're preserving our right to do tranny stuff and all this stuff, right?
Yep.
So we can sacrifice some because they're the other, because they are not agreeing to our march against boundaries. They don't accept our religious zeal to hate boundaries to the same degree that we do. I mean, Russians have gay figures. Russians have abortion. Russians have divorce. But that's outdated compared to our avant-garde of what we want, right? And so it's a culture thing of like, you have to eternally have revolution, eternally reevaluate what the frontier of boundaries need to be overthrown. And you can never just accept someone because, they got your divorce good. Isn't that good enough left? They're doing abortion a lot. Come on, isn't that good enough? No, it's not good enough because those are outdated forms of the revolution, and those would be revolted against too, right? Because you must continually sacrifice.
Revolution's
in the name of
a
eliminating
circle.
the possibility of sacrifice.
Yes.
Isn't that funny?
Right.
They're trapped. We're all trapped in it. And the problem I have with the right and everything else is because the more they keep playing in that game, the more they make it easier for them to push more and more insanity. So they need the right to say, hey, tranny, you're a nerd, you're ugly. That. They can't win without that. And they need Christians to be like otherizing. They need Christians to take the bait of otherizing these folks instead of bringing them out into repentance and love and community.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I wanted to ask you about repentance. I did an episode with a friend Cyprian on the I got to be careful how I say these words. I'm on 2 strikes. The tyrannical element of 2020, we'll call it, that we're pushing things that probably you don't like and I didn't like. One of them specifically in an article in The Atlantic, basically before she changed the subtitle, what she did after the initial pushback was asking for a form of forgiveness if she were to repent, so to speak, over the mistakes that were made by, let's say, the blue side, if you will, during 2020. And quickly, the reaction from the reactionaries from the back seat was, hell no, hang him from the lamppost, no forgiveness. But the sticky part here is if someone is willing to repent, we have to forgive. Or because if you lead with, I want you to swing from the lampposts, there will never be repentance. And that's when you get this crazy dialectic that goes back and forth, and it's chaotic from here on out. Do you see that as well? Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it's in every take any controversy. You'll see the same dynamic. Like, the whole mannequin things where they wanted to make Victoria's Secret mannequins really big, really extra large. Yeah. And what is the conservative reaction to it? Oh, you're fat, you're obese, because they're being told by the adults in the room. Unfortunately, you've let the children become the adults in the room. Christians are supposed to be the adults in the room. The people who say they're not Christians are now functionally the adults in the room because Christians have believed that they're reactionary. All they do is react like a little teen kid. Pathetic. Right? And they all do it. And that's because that's easy to get likes and clicks, man. That's how you make money. Yes, you want to be a little influencer and make some money, you cash in and just do that little gimmick. Yes. I saw there was a controversy where Matt Walsh or something was saying, berating some tranny person or something about,
you're ugly, you're never going to look good, you're never going to do that. And then you have the conservative, light, more left-leaning libertarians saying, oh, how dare you? This is not how you talk. And I'm like, this whole dialectic is all contrived.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't react this way, but we don't also react to the reaction, because then you're just chasing endless distraction. But like I call it the elephant man syndrome, right? You have the story of the elephant man, who was this disfigured guy. He had this, you have ever seen this picture of his face and everything?
Yeah.
And there, David Lynch made a movie about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I am not an animal. You know, that was a famous line. And he was paraded around in a freak show. And event, you know, they paraded around at different circuses. And the left wants to take the elephant man of our society and say, this is now the standard of beauty because you've made fun of him and you've put him on a freak show back in the day. Right?
Yep.
And the right, including so-called Christians and trans and everybody else, says, no, that man is a freak.
Yep.
Now, when I point this story out, it's effective because the right has been conditioned to still protect someone with that kind of a disfigurement like elephant, right? So they're like, no, of course you protect, right? But they've been trained because, again, they react to the leaders of their desires to do the same thing to other people who are obese or whatever, going through gender confusion or whatever. And they've been trained like Pavlovian dogs to react and say, ugly, disgusting, be beautiful, you know? And you're like, okay, well, you're not following Christ, okay? You're part of the problem.
Yeah.
You're just as much of a blind, idolatrous person as the person that you're reacting to.
Yeah.
Okay? So the answer isn't to idolize Elephant Man as the new standard of beauty. That's what the left does. And the answer isn't to be like the right that says, no, that man's ugly, put him in a freak show. The answer is to be like Christ, to love Elephant Man as a human being.
Yes, well put. And
that's it. And that's how it should be for everything. You know,
you mentioned you can't really squash this mimetic desire, but you can redirect it. And Father Turbo said the same thing about repentance, and this kind of opened my eyes in a way I had not seen before. Priests, when someone confesses and the priest wants you to repent, they're not saying stop doing the thing, stop the energy, so to speak. They're not cut the energy off. They're trying to redirect you the same energy, but in a positive manner, which is what the repentance part is.
Yeah. That's interesting because that reminds me of the story where Jesus, you know, you got to cast out the demons, but you got to put good spirits back in, you know?
Yes. Or otherwise 7 times more will come back and fill the room, I believe is something like that.
And it's that kind of the idea of like you're right. You can't just like cut off the energy. You've got to direct that energy back into positive things. That's what I'm saying with mimetic desire.
Right.
I do believe there's a physics component to mimetic desire that I've tried to bring about through the show and our physics segment. But I do believe you got to take that energy and direct it into good, healthy directions. And there was a guy named Napoleon Hill, and I'm not saying he's like a Christian, but you know, he talked about sexual transmutation. You know, you withhold from that, and you're able to channel that energy into creative ideas and inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why fasting comes into play, right?
Yes.
That's why you fast and have different times to fast from different foods and different things like that. Not because those things are evil, but having times to withhold from those things can allow you to channel that energy into more creative directions, to write, to meditate, to pray.
Yes.
Whatever, to have breakthroughs with psychological barriers that you have in your life. But, that's very good, well said. That we, you know, and I started off my radio show calling my show, because I remember Rush Limbaugh used to call himself the doctor of democracy. So I said, I'm your political exorcist. You know, I was like, what's better than a doctor?
Right.
I'm your exorcist. And then I meant that in the mimetic sense of how ideas and group feelings and group thoughts can literally possess us and make us truly believe what we're right and doing things which are wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Like the crowd trying to stone the adulterous woman, right?
Yes.
They truly believe she deserved to be murdered. Jesus didn't agree with that. But, you know, we have to I have to be careful with that term because, I was really engaged recently, and I started saying on my show, I started to take a look at some real life exorcist examples.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me about it, because I'd always seen it when I was younger and stuff, and I was always like, curious, but I don't know what that is. But when I was struck by this book by Malachi Martin, the late Catholic priest, he was an exorcist. He had a book called Hostage to the Devil. And he wrote it in the 1970s. And he was, I think, the inspiration for that Exorcist movie and all this. But he chronicles 5 American contemporary exorcisms, right, of people who are possessed. And it's very well written. And what I was struck by was how these real entities can appeal to the intellect, and they really get into an idea. And they go get into mimetic theory. They could do that for me and try to take that and stir it towards truth, but then deviate it right off at the last moment.
Yep.
And get me caught up in something that directs me away from goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting to think about because they come at you with the most subtle little thing. And they play a long game. And they love for you to think it's just hormones or just diet or just medication you need or just psychology or just some talk therapy you need about your childhood. They love for you to stay there because those things can be superficially beneficial, but they can also be missing the entire point, right? Missing the forest for the trees because they can keep you fixated chasing after fires at the surface level, and you're not dealing with what's going on at the spiritual level where real entities do appear to have the ability to direct us into very dark directions.
Mm-hmm.
And they play a long game. They will wait decades and decades to plant a thought to you when you're 8, plant it again at 12, plant it again, move it this way, put that person in your life, do that. And then you see what happens to these exorcists. Like one guy, Father Jonathan was his name in the story, and he made the mistake. They said, never say that you can do something of your own will. Always put the emphasis on Jesus. And the devil baited it, the entity baited him and said, like, you're going to be in for some suffering. And the father responded saying, I can endure this. And when he did that, the demons went into him and he went through 4 weeks of agonizing, almost losing his sense of self to the demonic possession himself.
Wow.
Because he invited them in.
Mm-hmm.
They can't come until you invite them. So and it made me, when I saw that, I said, my God, I should not play around with that term when I said I'm a political exorcist years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then I was kind of being campy about it. Like, when I did that in 2018, that's when the Antifa stuff and the people in the universities were running around frothing at the mouth. And they look like they're possessed, and they are possessed to various degrees and maybe in real malevolent ways. But, being kind of flippant about it, I thought, man, I got to be careful saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're baiting these entities and say, okay, you want to be a hotshot. Well, look what happened to Rush Limbaugh.
Mm.
4 marriages, no kids. I'm not judging him for that, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Dies at 70, lung cancer. I mean, he had a great life. He's a wonderful person. I'm not taking anything away from whatever he did, but his fight and the way he fought, right? He paid some prices.
Yeah.
Drug addiction. He took some, and I don't even agree with his overall worldview.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a talented person, talented broadcaster. But you can see that doing it that way has its toll.
Yeah.
And, you got to be careful playing with that stuff. And I think Trump, is learning that lesson. I hope, that when you do the whole, I'll be evil with my ego and my pride, that can get you for a while. And eventually it'll run you down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you even, I'm thinking back when I mentioned that Father Turbo saying priests try to redirect the desire, the energy, because you can't squash it completely. And even you saying that the thing about the exorcism, the demons will try to redirect you at the last moment too, because they know the energy and the desire, that doesn't go away, right? So even they're trying to do the same thing. I find that, I just put all that together as we're speaking about this.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, like, why do they say on occasion, people who witness these exorcisms say that they will levitate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like an analytical kind of person by a bias in a bad way, because I'm like, okay, why?
Mm-hmm.
If you are a dark entity force and you can create wars and then false flags and pestilence that maim children, millions of them, why are you playing around with parlor tricks in a room with 6 people and you're floating up? Like, what the hell? Don't you have better things to do that are evil? That seems like amateur. Like, what?
Child's
like,
play.
Are you
right?
that dumb? Like, if you're able to convince kings to lie people for generations and murders and wars and famines, why are you doing that? You know? And then someone told me the other day, a friend of mine was like, well, maybe they're just trying to distract the priest from their focus, which is to help the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do these parlor tricks, that's going to invite fear, awe, you know what I mean? And once you get in those feelings, then they can mess with you on those feelings and get you off of the focus. Because you might react in anger, you might react in your flesh, right? When you're fearful, you might stop it. You might be seduced by the dark side. I don't know how that would work, but I mean, I guess if you can levitate,
yeah,
you know,
that's it. That's a good point.
And then I think to myself, if they're so smart, why wouldn't they know that we're like, since we're so modernistic and skeptical, why do they levitate? Because don't they know that's going to catch on and people could be like, look, that's evidence of the spiritual world.
Right.
Think about that. And I'm like, well, but I don't think they've had them videotaped, so maybe they never do it when someone's videotaping. You know?
And even if they did, everyone's going to go,
or
that's a trick, or that's a screen, you know, there's some strings or something like that. What's the direction? Is there any direction you could articulate with what you're going to do now with your show? Anything different? Focus on some more intense matters for you. And I know you mentioned getting rid of kind of the mundane everyday news cycle of what did Kamala laugh about or what did Biden fall over, but what else are we going to kind of be looking at?
I'm going to do more with, we did a podcast we released today about near-death experience.
Okay.
And a scientist who chronicles near-death experiences, and Dr. John Hagen, who is a believer now because of, I guess, what he saw with his meticulous scientific compilations of all the data of people having these near-death experiences, where they recall, they're clinically dead and they report seeing what their loved one's doing in the room over there. And in a waiting room, you bought a Snickers, then you said, this is not going to do it, I need more food. They can recall that event while they're clinically dead in the operating table, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's measuring and chronicling these things, and he's saying this is beyond what science says. And he's an ophthalmologist, so he knows how the eye is supposed to generate seeing. But yet, he's got all these cases where people are seeing things and their eyes are shut and they're dead. How is that possible? This is supposed to be the window to where we get sight.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that I want to keep attacking materialism with my work. And I want to keep illustrating why it's got to go. And then I want to, we're going to do something with people who have been in the field of exorcism to get that information out to people. And we're going to do more of the anthropology stuff, being able to focus on my things hidden side of the podcast will allow me to get deeper dives into, I want to take mythologies and show them how they're doing what I'm saying about holding differentiation and keeping taboos, and I want to talk about more of the festivals, and I want to talk about more specific examples so that people don't just think this is just something that's just a novel theory, but they actually see it as a discovery of what history has actually revealed, and then rooting it back into biblical revelation and then rooting it back into current events. So I won't leave current events.
Gotcha.
I'll just dial it down a little bit and focus on deep dive stuff, which is hard to do in a live radio format because you have a clock, you have commercial breaks,
right?
You have advertisers. It's a different format, and it's hard to do a deep dive meditation with a guest or something where you can get into minutia. And it's also hard if you're tuning in, radio people are coming and going, and so if you tune in the middle of a really complex thing, you can lose people. But someone like, your audience, they're listening to the podcast usually from beginning to end, or they'll skip around or whatever they want to get to, right? So they're going to follow the order of the conversation. And they're also going to be pre-selected for wanting the topics that we're talking about, which radio, you're catching people who may or not be interested. So yeah, I mean, I think we'll do more with anthropology. We're going to do more with engineers and scientists doing stuff, because my show is kind of like juxtaposing the problem, which is politics and our idols and rivalries, and those bad desires, chasing after our rivals, and then taking those desires and directing it towards positive things, like curing cancer, curing diabetes, curing obesity, curing mental health illnesses, curing pollution. I think we should have, low temperature nuclear energy where we're not using high chamber, extremely expensive, very dangerous reactors, but we're using relatively simple reactors that can power our homes and neighborhoods and communities with water from the ocean or from our tap water even. And I think that here's why I'm saying this, because when I say this, I notice that this is the part where folks who like my ideas about anthropology and stuff start to get kind of confused sometimes, because they're like, why are you talking about that? We have become so conditioned to believe that people who believe in a brighter future are the globalists and the weirdos. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's like, I thought about that. I'm like, who talks like me? Like, who talks? There's a few you can mention. Most of the people who talk about innovation in Silicon Valley are still talking about AI and apps and Bitcoin. Those are all in the world of the bits. But I'm talking about atoms. And I'm talking about, let's have breakthrough innovations for the world in the world of atoms. The only people who talk anything about that are usually people in the globalists and the World Economic Forum and stuff. So I'm like, so that's my mark, like people are rolling their eyes because they've been hearing those types of people say that kind of stuff for decades in different iterations. And they've intuitively kind of learned to believe, well, those people are full of it and they don't have good ideas and they don't have good intentions. So when anybody tells me that we're going to cure cancer, I instinctively recoil and say, BS, not going to happen. Well, that's not a Christian response, right? Christians were called to have dominion on the earth. We were called to turn the garden into a beautiful city in the book of Revelation. We are meant to cultivate the earth. We are meant to deal with people the way Jesus dealt with. He says that we are his body on earth. So what did his body, when he was in his body on earth, what did he do? He performed signs and wonders. He helped people catch fish, right? He helped people feed their bellies with 5 fishes, right? That was an attack on scarcity. He heals people when they have a disease. We need to do that. We need to do those things. And we need to stop talking about it in some kind of thing where we compartmentalize that for the experts. Because currently, right now, if you talk to average Christians and you say, hey, why aren't we getting together Christians and creating a conference about healing? Let's figure out how to cure cancer, how to cure diabetes, how to cure heart disease, top 3 killers in America. Let's just take them out. First of all, they don't even know what you're talking about. That's what Jesus would do. Jesus was doing that. He was dealing with leprosy, dealing with these things, so they don't want to do that. But if they do, okay, let's do healing. So then you get to that section of people in the Christian world. Those are typically going to be people that say, okay, pray. You pray about it. Okay, that's good. Pray. That's extremely important. And then you're going to have some people who are like into the, like charismatic world, where you pray and do the, miraculous healing, which those do occur. And then you have the third one, which is going to be more like, well, just let the scientists do that. Let the doctors let's do a cancer walk and raise some money and go to some clinic that will keep doing some immunotherapy. So they're going to buy the establishment line for science, even though they think they're anti-establishment on every other thing. They're just going to take that same establishment conservative approach to that issue. Instead of rethinking that and saying, hey, if the textbooks, maybe they are fake news, just like the news is fake news. And maybe I need to rethink that. Maybe I need to look back and realize that a lot of the things that we think are settled science are only rarefied in our imagination because of mimetic adulation to the idols of the icons, the figures, the saints, the prophets, whatever you want to call it, who are the experts of that field. We know of one that they've talked about a lot in recent times that's become a villain and a saint, but there's many like that. And they have normalized ideas and they become protected because people say, well, hey, I saw them on Time magazine. Ansel Keys was a doctor who formulated the idea that we need to eat seed oils instead of animal fat, right? He was put on Time magazine, given all this illustrious rollout. So people just accept, okay, that's what the science says. And they went along with it. And our diseases have skyrocketed through the roof because of that one fatal mistake. So there's so many other things like that too. I believe that, for example, physics needs to be rethought. I think that physics is the holy of holies of scientism. And it became the holy of holies of scientism around the era of the dropping of the atomic bomb. Because they realized, wait a second, any science knowledge that can be credited with creating a world-destroying fire is a science that deserves to have caution tape and rarefied protection afforded to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a earth-shattering power. Their knowledge produces earth-shattering, earth-destroying power. That's apocalyptic. That's godlike from a humanist standpoint. That's like the Mowgli effect, like Jungle Book, where, Mowgli is only able to conquer the jungle when he can master the fire. Nobody else can figure that out. And that's why physicists got the benefit of the Mowgli effect. It's like, well, I don't know whatever y'all need, whatever money you need, we're going to go ahead and give it to you. Well, that's not true, because the theories that were popular at the time were giving credit for that breakthrough technology that I don't think they deserve. And I think they became enshrined in an untouchable status, not based on actual evidence, but because of, again, the mimetic prestige of Einstein and all these figures. Okay, nothing to see here. Don't touch it. We got it. You did it. We're good. This is history. And then he becomes a synonymous name for brilliant child. Next Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
That's branding more than it is actual evidence. Just like somebody telling us to do certain things was doing branding and politics, political science, not actual science. And now the whole world painfully recognizes that. Slowly but surely, they're recognizing. Right? So what I'm saying is there's so much work to be done in the world of atoms, and that Christians should be leading the way in that. They should be incarnating the truth of God. Being able to think smarter like Jesus means being able to challenge sacred cows and then look for the things that actually work. Rene Girard says that we didn't stop burning witches because we discovered the scientific method. We discovered the scientific method because we stopped burning witches. But what that means is that Christianity is what reveals the emptiness of sacrifice. And when you start to lose your believability in sacrifice, you'll still keep doing it for a time, but it'll lose its ability to unify. It'll lose its ability to create cohesion and meaning. And when that happens, you start to look around and say, well, maybe something else caused this plague. Let's look at that growth on that dead body right there on the nose and see what that is. And then they say, well, how do we do that? Let's get a piece of glass. You start creating technology.
Mm-hmm.
Those technologies end up becoming used for a whole host of different things. Christianity is the place where technology comes. Christianity is the place where technology comes and heals people, not destroys and creates more opportunity for war. So Christians should be leading science. Christians should be healing cancer and all these diseases as down payments on their authority as given to them by Christ to be kings and priests of this world. That's what we should be doing. Our conservative political conferences should be talking about curing cancer.
All right. Well, now that we know kind of the direction you're going in, which I think is my listeners are going to love this interview. I hope they do, because I do. This is one of my favorites I've done in maybe ever. This is my top 5, David. Plug away at where people can find your work.
Well, I would recommend folks just go to my website, aneighborschoice.com. That's ANEIGHBORS choice.com. And go to the homepage. You'll see a place where you can put your email in for our weekly update on our content highlights, our Things Hidden podcast. I do a podcast on nutrition called Seed Oil Survival, SOS, Seed Oil Survival. I do a physics thing called Science in You with my co-host, Dr. Yu, who's a physicist. And we also will do more. We'll evolve the Neighbor's Choice daily radio show into more one-off events where we do a little bit on politics and economics with folks like Jeff Dice. I mean, he was a very frequent guest every week on my show, and also was a fill-in guest, host many times on my show.
Yes. Yeah.
And Phil Bishop as well.
Yes.
And so you'll be seeing them on my show as well in the future. And it'll be more of this format, like Zoom usually will be how we'll do it, as we've done thus far on the online only side. So go to neighborschoice.com. You'll also see their different podcast platform icons where you can subscribe to us for the audio podcast, that way you don't miss an episode that we do. And then we have a Rumble icon on the homepage too, where you can click that and subscribe. We were deleted off of YouTube, years ago. I don't know how long now, but a couple years ago. And but some of our videos are on YouTube. But we
it says
promote,
something like David Gornoski favorites or something like that, if I remember.
Yeah. So that's, folks can use that, but I promote Rumble only, and
Got it.
so
Okay.
you guys want to enjoy the YouTube stuff that people put on, that's fine. But I'm only promoting the Rumble because I don't want to give those fascist book burners any more reason to delete content, that is against their ethic over at Google. But that's the best way to stay in touch with my work. And you can email me hello@neighborschoice.com if you'd like to ask a question or any other follow-up thoughts.
Excellent. Twitter handle?
That's at David Gornoski. That's something I started recently with Elon taking over Twitter.
Got it. Okay.
So follow me at David Gornoski, and then a neighbor's choice is the show page.
Got it. I'll link to all of these in the show notes page for this episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, David, this has been great, man. I really appreciate it. I know people are going to love this one. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And let's do it again sometime.
Well, we definitely will. Will.
All right. Take care.
What did you think of that interview? Leave some comments on the YouTube page. Again, if you've not subscribed to that, go ahead and please do that, of course, on YouTube. Search Counterflow with Buck Johnson. Watch the video version of this if you like. And if you did, leave some comments. What did you think about this interview? And if you want to email me, you're always welcome to do that. Find all of this information at counterflowpodcast.com. You can follow me, of course, on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And I told you about that Patreon exclusive club. Join it and come aboard our monthly Zoom calls. It's a lot of fun. Until next week, friends, y'all have a good one. See ya.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.